On Wednesday, the U.S. State Department released its annual report on international religious freedom that details the status of religious freedom in nearly 200 foreign countries and territories. The report covers government policies that violate religious belief and practices of groups, religious denominations, and individuals. It also covers U.S. policies to promote religious freedom around the world. The U.S. State Department submits the reports in accordance with the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. So this year's report is the 23rd report. With me now to talk about it is Travis Weber, FRC's Vice President for Policy and Government Affairs. Travis, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So tell us why this report matters to us.
Yeah, so the report matters because it highlights specifically the issue of international religious freedom. It matters that in the plethora of issues our foreign policy deals with and the State Department handles internationally, it matters that this issue rises to the top and is prioritized in our foreign policy. So the State Department releasing this annually is basically saying, look, we are tracking religious freedom around the world. We care about it. We're taking note of what problems are occurring and what positive trends are developing. And theoretically, they should be acting on these problems and positive trends. And so that's why, in context, this is important as an annual measure. It's good to see them release it. There obviously needs to be more work, but it's a good thing that the United States has going here in terms of religious freedom and foreign policy.
Do we have a history of acting on the report and taking steps to improve conditions around the world?
So the answer is it depends. Different administrations have been better than others. The Trump administration, for instance, in terms of international religious freedom actions, for instance, when Turkey was holding Pastor Andrew Brunson, they reacted by sanctioning high-level Turkish officials under Executive Order 13818 under the authority of the Global Magnitsky Act, which says they can be sanctioned for human rights violations. Now, this was not directly in response to this report, but it's an example of an action the type of which we should be taking based on this report. So they should be saying, look how China did this year. How did Nigeria do? They're both not doing great. There's a lot of problems in both those countries. Sanctions are one tool, among others, that the United States government has at its disposal to deal with these issues, sanctioning officials in those countries, in addition to calling them out, pressing them on it diplomatically, asking them about it. These are things that need to follow up this report.
Now, the report that was released on Wednesday, what were some of the highlights? What are the things that we should be acting on?
Yeah, so I mentioned China and Nigeria already. It was good to see in the descriptions of those countries mention of a lot of the issues that we have been tracking over the past months and years. In China, for instance, the religious freedom violations targeting the Uyghur Muslim community, Tibetan Buddhist, Falun Gong, Christian house churches, other Christians in China as well. I mean, frankly, even the recognized Patriotic Church in China, which is the one approved by the government, has issues in terms of not a full free practice of its religious faith. So China across the board, a lot of issues detailed we've seen over the past months and years that we glad to see detailed in this report. They need to be acted on, though. Nigeria, attacks by Fulani herdsmen on Christian communities, in addition to the problems that we see from Boko Haram and others targeting Christians in the north. There's a big Muslim-Christian divide in terms of a fault line in the conflict in that country, and that's something the government needs to address, though. They need to get a handle on it and make sure that religious freedom is protected. And right now, Christians are being targeted in that country as well as elsewhere in Africa. I mean, we've been detailing Mozambique, Burkina Faso, other African countries as well. But those are two countries that we think there needs to be action taken.
You mentioned the fact that different administrations respond differently to this subject and take varying degrees of seriousness. Secretary Blinken had some things to say about how he views religious freedom, and I want to listen to that and then give you a chance to respond.
Religious freedom is co-equal with other human rights because human rights are indivisible. Religious freedom is not more or less important than the freedom to speak and assemble, to participate in the political life of one's country, to live free from torture or slavery, or any other human right. Indeed, they're all interdependent.
What do you think of this idea that religious freedom is co-equal with other human rights?
Yeah, it's just wrong. What he said has a lot of problems. Primarily, we just disagree. That's not true. The reality is religious freedom is foundational to and fundamental to the development of many other rights. Now, human rights, it's a term, it's kind of a separate discussion here, but let's go in it since he's using the term human rights and referencing that. I mean, human rights is a term that has a long and noble history in the civilizations, Western civilization, but just history of the world. Human rights has a place, culminating most significantly in the development of the documents which came out of the United Nations post-Holocaust after World War II. It's not a term that you can just throw any policy into and say, let's just stick it in there and call it a human right. So this is dangerous. We start kind of saying everything's a human right, it's all independent. No, religious freedom has a fundamental place that's foundational and integral to that whole structure, and it comes crashing down once you start saying, well, it doesn't matter, and it gets equal to other human rights. So that's problematic, and there's a lot of bad policy that comes out of that type of thinking.
Do you think that this is an attempt to minimize the significance of religious freedom broadly? Because we know that the left has been fond of saying that, well, religious freedom is really just a license to discriminate. So is this just another way of saying we don't think it's as important as you do?
I do think it's a deliberate attempt to deprioritize it. This is very deliberate, changing the policy of what the Trump administration had done under Secretary Pompeo here. I don't know if he actually believes that. It seems sort of planned in his remarks there as he's kind of stating, his comments about religious freedom there. But the point is that that's still wrong, what he's saying. And it's very dangerous and very problematic when that is starting implemented. I do think there are concerns that's paving the way to just marginalize religious freedom.
And when he says that religious freedom is co-equal with other human rights, and the way the left talks about rights these days, everything is a human right. Essentially, housing and money and food and employment, everything is a human right. What's the risk of basically saying religious freedom is just like all of those other things we kind of hope you have?
Well, the risk is if it's eventually marginalized and cast off to the side. And as you say, everything can be jammed in once you go down this line of thinking. So it's important for us to take note of it and say, well, no, push back. Religious freedom is important and a priority when we talk about human rights, and some are more foundational and fundamental than others.
Travis Weber, thank you so much for your time for joining us.
Thank you.
Stay with us. Sean